Hello and welcome. This is Richard Golson, and I'm going to walk us through Lab 3, Introduction to Amazon EC2. Let's talk about the lab overview and the objectives. This is going to give us a basic overview of launching, resizing, managing, and monitoring an Amazon EC2 instance. As you might recall, Amazon EC2 provides us the ability to create virtual machines, which are called EC2 instances or just instances. The EC2 service is a web service that provides these resizable compute capacity in the cloud. It does make it easier to launch these EC2 instances or virtual machines. It's got a pretty straightforward interface that lets us gather information about our resources that we have created or are managing. We can take a look at those resources through a global view, or we can do that in a region. Here we can see the Northern Virginia region here. Click down. And at this stage, I believe that is the only region that we have resources running. I click a different region, and we can see that the resource that we saw previously is no longer visible. When I go back, we can see that there is a resource running right here. As usual, when we start a lab session using Vocarium, there's often resources created for us, and one is no exception. Again, if we take a look here, we can see that there is a running instance that we will not be using. We will be creating our own using the launch instance wizard. Let's scroll down here and learn a little bit more about the lab itself. So a couple of things to keep in mind when you're launching an EC2, you'll have many different choices to make, and we want to make sure that we select the appropriate settings for the specific EC2 that we are being directed to create. We'll be able to do that from the wizard. In the lab itself, we should be able to do the following by the completion of the lab: launching that web server with termination protection enabled. We'll talk about that a little later. We should be able to monitor the EC2 instance. AWS gives us plenty of controls for monitoring, including status and alarms, more detailed monitoring in terms of resource usage, and monitoring in terms of logs, etc. We will also be able to modify a security group that our web service is using that will allow HTTP access. We're going to resize the EC2 instance, so this will allow us to scale the EC2 instance. And during that, we will enable stop protection. We'll explore some of the EC2 limits, and then we're going to be able to test that stop protection. More about that a little bit later. Then we actually stop the EC2 instance. The lab itself takes about 35 minutes to complete. And as always, when we're done, what we want to do is make sure that we submit the lab. At any time, we can submit it, check the grades, look at the submission report, see how we're doing there. Make sure at the end of the lab, when you complete the last step or task, before you close or end the lab, make sure you provide enough time, generally about 5 minutes, for the last action to complete and log, so that when the Vocarium checks your lab results, it has time to get the information it needs to provide the score. So give it that extra 5 minutes that they're talking about here. If you still don't have the score after 5 minutes, give it a few more minutes. If not, then make sure you're checking that submission report and see what it is that you missed on that. All right, that's it for our lab overview. We'll take a look at this next task, or task 1. I'll see you then.